The crystal palace of the Veshan Empire stretched high into the purple sky. Its walls caught the light of 3 suns and threw rainbows across the marble floors. Inside the grand hall, representatives from 40 different worlds stood talking in small groups. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few glowed with soft inner light. They wore elaborate robes and carried ceremonial weapons that had not seen real battle in centuries. Jake Morrison stood near the eastern wall, his hands relaxed at his sides. He wore a simple gray uniform, with no decorations, except a small Earth flag on his shoulder. His eyes moved constantly, watching the crowds, checking the exits, noting who stood where. He had been doing this job for 3 years now, and his body knew the rhythms of danger, even when his mind was at ease. The Veshan were celebrating a treaty signing. 5 new worlds were joining their alliance, and the mood in the palace was light. Musicians played instruments that sounded like wind through glass. Servants carried trays of food that smelled sweet and strange. Diplomats laughed and made jokes in a dozen different languages. Ambassador Kyle Brooks stood in the center of it all, shaking hands and making promises. He was good at his job. He could make anyone feel important. With just a few words, Jake had been assigned to protect him. Though Kyle insisted, he did not need protection. "We're guests here," he had said that morning. "We're among friends. We're among friends." Jake had nodded and said nothing. He had learned long ago that the time to worry was exactly when everyone else felt safe. Near the fountain, Commander Lisa Grant stood talking with the Veshan defense minister. She was explaining Earth's orbital defense systems, though she left out the important parts. The Veshan thought humans were peaceful. They thought Earth's military was small and defensive. It was better to let them think that. Queen Sareth entered the hall through the southern doors. She was young for a Veshan ruler. Barely 30 cycles, which was like 20 human years. Her skin was pale blue and seemed to shine from within. She wore a crown made of living crystal that grew from her own biology. The Veshan were beautiful creatures, delicate and graceful. They looked like they would break if you touched them too hard. The crowd bowed as she passed. She smiled and nodded, her 4 eyes taking in everything at once. Jake had studied Veshan biology before coming here. Their extra eyes let them see in multiple directions. Their bones were hollow like birds. They had evolved on a world with low gravity and few predators. War was something they read about in history books, not something they understood in their blood. The Queen made her way through the crowd, stopping to speak with various ambassadors. She spent 10 minutes with the Corvan delegation, who had brought her gifts of singing stones. She laughed at something the Draxian minister said, her voice like small bells. Slowly, she worked her way toward the eastern side of the hall. Jake noticed her approach before she had taken 3 steps in his direction. He did not move, but his weight shifted slightly, his center of balance adjusting without thought. Years of training had made such movements automatic. "You are the human called Jake Morrison," the Queen said, stopping a few feet away from him. She spoke English, with only a slight accent. "Yes, Your Majesty." Jake bowed slightly, the way he had been taught. "I have been watching you," she said. "You do not eat. You do not drink. You do not speak with the others." "I am working, Your Majesty." "Working," she repeated, as if tasting the word. "But there are no threats here. We have our own security forces. See?" She gestured to the Veshan guards stationed around the hall. They wore ornamental armor that looked impressive, but would stop nothing more dangerous than harsh words. "I see them, Your Majesty." "Then why do you stand here, so alert, so watchful?" She tilted her head, genuinely curious. "The other species have sent guards too, but they stand in groups, talking and relaxing. Only you humans seem unable to rest." Jake considered his answer carefully. "It is our way, Your Majesty. We take protection seriously. But who protects you?" The question came suddenly, catching Jake off guard. The Queen stepped closer, her 4 eyes studying his face. All these other species, they have guards who watch over guards. Layers of security. But you humans, you seem to have no one watching over you. Ambassador Brooks walks among us with only you standing in the shadows. Who keeps you safe? Jake Morrison. For just a moment, Jake's professional mask slipped. Something cold and ancient moved behind his eyes. We protect each other, Your Majesty. Every human is trained to fight. Every human knows that if one of us falls, the others will respond. Respond how? However necessary. The Queen laughed, a tinkling sound that made others in the hall turn to look. You make it sound so serious, but surely you exaggerate. Not every human is a warrior. Jake's expression did not change. Every human carries the capacity for war, Your Majesty. We are born with it. We just choose, most of the time, not to use it. And when you cannot protect each other? She asked, still smiling. Then we become very, very angry. The Queen's smile faltered. She had expected a joke, a deflection, anything but that flat, emotionless statement. She looked into Jake's eyes and saw something that made her take an involuntary step backward. It was not threat, exactly. It was more like looking into deep water and realizing you could not see the bottom. I see, she said quietly. I think I understand. But she did not understand. Not really. How could she? Her people had lived in peace for 10,000 years. They had forgotten what it meant to be afraid. They had forgotten that some species remembered violence in their bones. The conversation ended awkwardly. The Queen moved away to speak with other guests, but she kept glancing back at Jake throughout the evening. He remained at his post, unmoving, watching everything. In orbit above the planet, ships from a dozen species floated in peaceful formation. Trade vessels mixed with passenger liners and a few light escort craft. The Veshan did not believe in heavy military presence. It seemed aggressive, unwelcoming. Captain Daniel Price stood on the bridge of the ESS Valiant, one of only 3 human ships in the system. It was classified as a destroyer, which was true. But the classification did not capture what the ship could really do. Price watched his screens with the same intensity Jake showed in the palace below. Anything? He asked his sensor officer. Nothing unusual, sir. Standard traffic patterns. Price nodded but did not relax. Something felt wrong. He could not explain it. Could not point to any data that supported his instinct. But he had learned to trust that feeling. In the darkness beyond the system's edge, ships without lights drifted closer. They moved slowly, cutting their engines, letting momentum carry them forward. They had been planning this for months. Studying patrol patterns. Identifying weaknesses. The Crone Dominion did not believe in asking for what they wanted. They believed in taking it. Back in the palace, the celebration continued late into the night. Ambassador Brooks made his final speech, talking about friendship and cooperation. The crowd applauded. Musicians played a traditional Veshan song about the beauty of peace. Jake Morrison stood in the shadows and watched the exits. His hand rested near his sidearm, hidden beneath his jacket. In his earpiece, Lisa Grant's voice whispered updates about nothing important. Everything seemed perfect. Everything seemed safe. That was when Jake knew something was about to go very wrong. 3 days passed like a peaceful dream. Ambassador Kyle Brooks attended morning meetings with the Veshan Council. He discussed trade agreements and cultural exchanges. He smiled for photographs and made promises about friendship between their worlds. Jake Morrison followed him everywhere, a silent shadow that most people learned to ignore. On the 3rd day, the sky caught fire. Jake was standing in the palace gardens when the first explosion lit up the atmosphere. He looked up and saw a Veshan orbital station breaking apart, pieces of it tumbling toward the planet in burning streaks. His hand went to his communicator before his conscious mind had processed what he was seeing. Lisa, report. Static answered him. Then screaming. Then, nothing. The palace alarm system started wailing 3 seconds later. It made a sound like wind through pipes, rising and falling in waves that were supposed to be calming. The Veshan had designed their alarms to avoid causing panic. Jake thought that was stupid. He ran toward the palace entrance, speaking into his communicator as he moved. All human personnel, code black. Repeat. Code black. Rally point Alpha. Around him, alien diplomats stood frozen, looking at the sky with confusion. They did not understand what was happening. Their worlds had been at peace so long that war had become something abstract, something that happened in other places to other people. The Veshan royal guards were rushing toward the palace walls, but they moved without urgency, without the sharp efficiency that real soldiers showed. They called to each other in their musical language, asking questions, waiting for orders from superiors who were just as confused. Jake reached the palace doors as the second wave of explosions walked across the city. He could see ships now, descending through the atmosphere with their weapons firing continuously. They were not trying to avoid civilian targets. They were hitting everything. Jake! Ambassador Brooks appeared in the doorway, his face pale. What is happening? We are under attack, sir. I need to get you to the secure room. But the Queen is not my responsibility. You are. Move. More human personnel were arriving. Lieutenant Amy Rogers came running from the East Wing with 3 security officers behind her. She had blood on her uniform, but none of it seemed to be hers. The communications array is gone, she said, breathing hard. I tried to reach the Valiant, but something is jamming all frequencies. How many humans do we have in the building? 15 total. 8 security, 7 support staff. Weapons? Sidearms for security, nothing heavy. This was supposed to be a diplomatic mission. Jake nodded. 15 people. 15 humans against an unknown enemy force that had just destroyed orbital defenses and was currently bombing the capital city. The odds were bad. He had faced worse. Amy, get everyone to rally point Alpha. Full defensive posture. Assume no rescue is coming. She met his eyes and understood. This was not an extraction. This was a last stand. Yes, sir. The palace shook as something massive hit nearby. Dust fell from the ceiling. In the grand hall, alien diplomats were finally starting to panic. They ran in different directions, calling for their own security forces, demanding answers that no one had. The Vatian guards tried to maintain order, but they had no training for this. They shouted commands that contradicted each other. Some ran toward the walls. Others ran inward, trying to protect the Queen. None of them looked like they knew how to actually fight. Jake grabbed Ambassador Brooks by the arm and half-dragged him toward the inner chambers. The secure room was deep in the palace, behind 3 sets of reinforced doors. It had been built centuries ago during the last war the Veshan had fought, which was so long ago that no living Veshan remembered it. They were halfway there when the eastern wall exploded inward. The blast picked Jake up and threw him 15 feet. He hit a marble column and felt ribs crack. His ears rang. His vision went white, then red, then slowly cleared. He pushed himself up, tasting blood, and saw figures moving through the smoke and dust. The Crone Dominion soldiers were 7 feet tall and built like tanks. They wore armor that looked organic, like it had been grown rather than manufactured. They carried weapons that fired superheated plasma in steady streams. 3 of them walked through the hole in the wall, firing at anything that moved. A Veshan guard raised his ceremonial spear and charged. The plasma bolt hit him center mass, and he simply ceased to exist, turned to ash in a fraction of a second. Jake's hand went to his sidearm, drawing without thought, muscle memory taking over. He fired 4 times in 2 seconds. 3 rounds hit the lead Crone in the face, punching through the armor's weak point at the neck seal. The soldier went down. The other 2, Crone turned toward him. Jake was already moving, diving behind a column as plasma fire chewed through the marble where he had been standing. He came up firing, walking his shots up the second Crone's torso. The alien staggered, but did not fall. Then Amy Rogers appeared from the side corridor with 2 security officers. They opened fire together. Concentrated shots that finally dropped the second Crone. The third one got his weapon around, But Jake was faster. He put 3 rounds through the alien's eye. The fight had lasted maybe 10 seconds. "Ambassador." Jake turned and saw Brooks lying on the floor, holding his leg. Blood spread across the white marble beneath him. "I am fine," Brooks said through gritted teeth. "Just get me to the secure room." Amy helped Jake lift the ambassador. They half-carried him deeper into the palace, moving fast. Behind them, they could hear more explosions, more screaming, more plasma fire cutting through ancient stone. Rally Point Alpha was a wide chamber near the throne room. It had good sight lines and multiple exit routes. When Jake arrived with the ambassador, he found the other human personnel already there. They had moved furniture to create barricades. They had weapons ready. They looked scared, but focused. "Status," Jake said, setting the ambassador down behind the thickest barricade. "Enemy forces landing all over the city," one of the security officers reported. "Estimates put them at 5,000 troops, maybe more. The Veshan military is not responding. I think they were hit first. And the other species? Most of them are evacuating. The Korvan ambassador already made it to his ship. The Draxians are fighting their way to the spaceport. Are they taking the Veshan with them?" Silence answered that question. Queen Sareth appeared in the doorway, surrounded by what remained of her royal guard. There were maybe 30 of them left, and half were wounded. The queen herself looked untouched, but deeply shaken. Her 4 eyes were wide with an emotion Jake recognized. "The first time you understand that you might die." "The humans," she said, seeing Jake. "You are still here." "Yes, Your Majesty. Everyone else is leaving. They are taking their people and running. We are not everyone else." She stared at him. "You will stay, even knowing you cannot win?" Jake checked his weapon, reloaded, and looked at her. "You said you protect each other." "That is right. Ambassador Brooks is injured. He is one of us. So we stay until we can get him out, or until we cannot fight anymore." "That is insane. That is human." The palace shook again. Plasma fire raked the outer corridors. The Crone were coming. Methodical and unstoppable. They were not here to negotiate. They were not here to take prisoners. They were here to break the Vashan Empire. And they were doing it one building at a time. Amy Rogers appeared at Jake's side. "I got through to the Valiant. Captain Price is still up there, but he is in a bad way. Crone Fleet has him boxed in. He says he cannot extract us. Did you send the code?" "Not yet." Jake looked around the chamber. 15 humans. 1 wounded ambassador. A queen who had never seen war until today. Enemy forces that outnumbered them hundreds to 1. He thought about Earth, 40 light-years away. He thought about the standing orders that every human in diplomatic service carried. He thought about what would happen when Earth found out their people had been attacked. "Send it," he said. "Send the Broken Arrow code." Amy hesitated. "Jake, you know what that means. You know what they will do." "I know exactly what they will do. Send it." She nodded and turned away, speaking into her communicator in a low voice. Jake moved to the barricade and checked the sight lines. The Crone would be here in minutes. His people had enough ammunition for maybe 30 minutes of sustained fighting. After that, it would be hand to hand. After that, it would be fists and teeth and whatever else they could find. Queen Sareth approached him. "This broken arrow, what is it?" Jake did not look at her. He was watching the corridor, waiting for the enemy to appear. "It is a code, Your Majesty. It means that human diplomatic personnel are under attack and cannot be extracted. And what happens when Earth receives this code? They answer the question you asked me 3 days ago. I do not understand." Jake finally looked at her. His eyes were cold and dark, like looking into deep space. "You asked who protects us when we cannot protect each other. You are about to find out." Number 2. The first Crone soldiers appeared at the end of the corridor. Jake raised his weapon and started firing. Around him, 14 other humans did the same. The sound was deafening, in the enclosed space. The battle for the palace had begun. Earth received the broken arrow code at 0347 hours, Universal Standard Time. The signal came through 15 relay stations, bouncing across light years of space in compressed data packets. It took 18 minutes to reach Earth. By the 19th minute, the entire human military had shifted from routine operations to something else entirely. Admiral Helen Carter was sleeping when her command staff woke her. She did not ask questions. She simply got dressed, walked to her office, and read the report. Then she picked up her communicator and gave orders that would reshape the entire sector. All ships of Third Fleet are to prepare for immediate deployment. Maximum combat load. We are going to the Veshon system. Her second in command, a cautious man named Gregory Hunt, cleared his throat. Admiral, we are 48 hours away, even at maximum jump speed. Then we make it in 40 hours. That jump sequence is not safe. We will burn out half our drive systems. I do not care about drive systems. Human personnel are under attack. We go now. Throughout Earth's orbital shipyards, klaxons began to wail. Ships that had been in dock for maintenance suddenly found themselves being loaded with weapons and supplies. Crews were pulled from leave. Marines who had been eating breakfast suddenly found themselves running to drop ships. The entire Third Fleet, 97 warships strong, began moving into formation. They were not the only ones responding. Every human military asset within 3 systems redirected toward Veshon space. Destroyers broke off from patrol routes. Carriers abandoned training exercises. Even the old battleship Roosevelt, which had been scheduled for decommissioning, powered up its ancient weapons systems and joined the rush. The galaxy watched and did not understand what they were seeing. Humanity had always presented itself as peaceful, defensive. Their military was supposed to be small, focused on protecting Earth itself. Now ships were appearing from everywhere, pouring out of systems where no one had known humans even had a presence. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from 40 species stood in their great chamber and argued about what to do. The humans are mobilizing their entire military, the Corvan delegate said, his voice shaking. This is an overreaction to a local incident. One of their ambassadors was killed. Someone else pointed out, ambassadors die. It is tragic, but it happens. You do not start a war over one person, but humans did. The galaxy was beginning to understand that humans did exactly that. On the Veshon homeworld, Jake Morrison was fighting his 6th hour of continuous combat. The Crone kept coming in waves, and each wave was met with precise, devastating fire from the human defenders. But there were only 14 humans left now, and their ammunition was running critically low. Jake's sidearm was empty. He had switched to a Crone plasma rifle that he had taken from a dead soldier. The weapon was too large for human hands, but he made it work. His ribs were definitely broken now, and his left arm hung at an awkward angle, but he could still pull a trigger. The throne room had become a fortress. Bodies lay piled near the entrance, most of them Crone. The floor was slick with fluids that might have been blood, though different species bled in different colors. The smell was overwhelming, a mixture of burned flesh and ozone, and something acidic that made Jake's eyes water. Ambassador Brooks had stopped screaming an hour ago. He was unconscious now, which was probably a mercy. The Veshon medic had done what she could, but she had no idea how human biology worked. Queen Sareth crouched behind the barricade near Jake. She had stopped asking questions. She just watched with all 4 eyes as these strange creatures from Earth fought with a ferocity she had not known existed in civilized beings. Amy Rogers appeared at Jake's side. She had blood on her face and a burn across her shoulder, but she was still moving. "We are down to our last magazines," she said. "Maybe 10 minutes of ammunition total. And then it gets interesting." Jake almost smiled. "How many did we take? Rough estimate?" "About 300 Crone. Maybe more." We stopped counting. 300. 14 humans had killed 300 enemy soldiers. The mathematics of it seemed impossible. But the evidence lay scattered throughout the palace. "They will rush us soon," Jake said. "When they realize we are out of ammunition. Are the people ready?" "As ready as they can be," Jake nodded. He had made his peace with dying hours ago. He just wanted to take as many crone with him as possible. It was a simple equation, really. The more he killed here, the fewer would survive to hurt other humans later. His communicator crackled. "Jake, this is Price. Do you copy?" "I copy, Captain. Good to hear your voice. Listen to me. I am still up here. The Crone fleet has me pinned, but I am not dead yet. I just wanted you to know. The Third Fleet is coming. Carter is burning her ships down to nothing to get here. 40 hours, Jake. Can you hold for 40 hours? Jake looked around the throne room. 14 exhausted humans. No ammunition. Thousands of Crone soldiers surrounding them. 40 hours might as well have been 40 years. We will do our best, sir. I know you will. Price paused. Jake, they killed Kyle. They killed our ambassador. Command wants me to tell you you do not have to hold back anymore. You understand? Jake understood. There were rules for diplomatic personnel. Rules about proportional response. About avoiding civilian casualties. About maintaining humanity's peaceful image. Those rules had just been suspended. Tell Admiral Carter we will leave some for her, Jake said. That is my boy. Price out. The communicator went silent. Jake turned to Amy. Spread the word. No rules. No mercy. We fight until we cannot fight anymore. She grinned, a wild expression that would have looked insane on anyone who had not been fighting for 6 hours straight. Now, you are talking. The Crone attacked again an hour later. This time they came from 3 directions at once. A coordinated assault meant to overwhelm the defenders. They had learned to respect human accuracy. They had learned that walking into that chamber meant dying. So they came in fast, firing constantly, using their numbers to push through. Jake's weapon ran dry after the first 10 seconds. He threw it at the nearest Crone, hitting the alien in the face, then drew a knife from his boot. It was a simple combat blade, nothing fancy, but it was sharp and he knew how to use it. The Crone soldier that came through the barricade did not expect the human to attack. They expected him to run, to surrender, to beg for mercy. Instead, Jake lunged forward and drove the knife up through the weak point in the alien's armor, angling it toward where he hoped the heart was located. The Crone screamed, a sound like metal tearing. Jake twisted the blade and shoved, using his whole body weight. The alien fell backward, and Jake went down with him, stabbing repeatedly, mechanically, until the screaming stopped. Around him, other humans were doing the same thing. When their guns ran dry, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their hands. Amy Rogers had a Crone in a chokehold, her legs wrapped around its torso, squeezing with strength that seemed impossible from someone her size. Another security officer was beating a Crone with a piece of broken furniture, hitting it over and over until it stopped moving. Queen Sareth watched all of this and felt something fundamental shift in her understanding of the universe. She had thought humans were like other species, civilized, controlled, bound by the same social rules that everyone else followed. She had been wrong. Humans wore civilization like a coat, and when necessary, they could take it off. The attack broke. The Crone pulled back, regrouping, trying to understand what had just happened. They had numerical superiority. They had better weapons. They had every advantage except one. They were not willing to die the way humans were. Jake pulled himself off the dead Crone and stumbled back to the barricade. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally catching up with him. He counted heads. 11 humans left, 3 more gone, in that last assault. How long did Price say? Amy asked, leaning against the wall. 40 hours when he called. Probably 38 now. We cannot hold for 38 hours. No, Jake agreed. We cannot. But they would try anyway. because that was what humans did. They tried impossible things, and sometimes, just sometimes, they succeeded. In orbit, Captain Price watched his tactical display with grim satisfaction. The Crone fleet had him surrounded, but he had been leading them on a chase for hours, using every trick he knew to stay alive. His ship was falling apart, hull breaches on 3 decks, weapons systems at 40%, engines barely holding together, but he was still here, still fighting, and every minute he survived was another minute that Jake's people had to hold on. "Sir," his weapons officer said, "we have 1 missile left." "Just 1?" "Yes, sir. Everything else is gone." Price looked at his screen. The Crone flagship sat 2,000 kilometers away, massive and arrogant, directing the battle below. 1 missile would not kill it, would barely scratch its shields, but it would make a statement. "Fire it," Price said. "Sir, fire the missile at the flagship. Let them know we are still here." The missile launched, a tiny spark of light racing across the darkness. The Crone flagship destroyed it easily, its point defense systems working perfectly. But Captain Price was smiling, because he had just received a message on his private channel, a message that said the Third Fleet had cut their travel time to 36 hours. The cavalry was coming. They just had to survive a little longer. Down in the palace, Jake Morrison settled in for another long night of fighting. His body was broken. His weapons were gone. His people were dying around him. But he was not afraid, because he knew something the Crone did not know. Something the galaxy was about to learn. You could kill a human. You could hurt humans. You could even make them afraid. But you could not make them stop fighting. Not when one of their own had fallen. Not when they had sent the signal, asking for help. The answer was coming, and it would be terrible to behold. The Third Fleet arrived in the Veshon system exactly 34 hours after the Broken Arrow signal was sent. They did not announce themselves. They did not hail the Crone forces. They simply dropped out of faster-than-light travel and began killing everything that was not human or Veshon. Admiral Helen Carter stood on the bridge of her flagship, the ESS Thunderchild, and watched her tactical display with cold satisfaction. The Crone fleet had been arranged in orbit, confident in their victory. They had destroyed the Veshon defenses. They had surrounded Captain Price's lone destroyer. They controlled the space around the planet. They controlled nothing now. "All ships," Carter said, her voice calm and steady. "Weapons free. No prisoners. No surrender. Show them what happens when they touch our people." 97 warships opened fire at once. The Crone fleet had maybe 40 vessels, and they were caught completely by surprise. The first wave of missiles destroyed half their fleet before they could raise shields. The second wave crippled most of the rest. The Crone flagship tried to turn, tried to bring its main weapons to bear. It managed to fire 3 times before 17 human destroyers concentrated their fire on its command deck. The ship broke in half, its atmosphere venting in a massive plume of frozen gases. Captain Price, still somehow alive in his dying ship, watched the human fleet tear through the Crone forces and felt something like joy. "About time," he muttered, then ordered his crew to begin emergency repairs. They were going to survive this after all. On the planet's surface, Colonel Ryan Foster was leading the fastest combat drop in human military history. His Marines hit the atmosphere in armored pods that glowed white-hot from friction. They did not slow down. They did not adjust course. They simply aimed for the largest concentrations of Crone troops and let gravity do the work. The pods hit the ground like meteorites. Each impact created a small crater and sent shockwaves rippling through the city. The Crone soldiers near the impacts were thrown off their feet, stunned by the violence of the landing. Then the pods opened, and the Marines came out fighting. Foster's regiment was 2,000 strong, and they spread through the city like a wave of destruction. They had been training for this their entire lives: urban combat, overwhelming enemy forces, taking and holding ground against impossible odds. This was what they were built for. The Crone had never faced anything like it. Their soldiers were tough, well-armed, and experienced. But they fought with caution, with an instinct for self-preservation that had been bred into them over countless generations. The humans had no such instinct. They fought with the reckless fury of people who had been told that their family was in danger. In the palace, Jake Morrison heard the explosions getting closer. He was barely conscious now, propped against a wall, his body held together by willpower and spite. 8 humans remained. 8 out of 15. They had held for 34 hours. "They are here," Amy Rogers said, her voice cracking with emotion she had been holding back for a day and a half. "Jake, our people are here." He nodded. He wanted to say something profound, something worthy of the moment. But all he could manage was, "Good." The palace doors exploded inward. For a moment, Jake thought it was another Crone assault. He tried to raise his weapon, but his arms would not work anymore. Then Colonel Foster walked through the smoke, his armor scorched black, his rifle still smoking. He took one look at the throne room, the bodies, the blood, the exhausted humans who had held this position for 34 hours, and his expression went cold. "Medic!" he shouted. "Get medics in here now!" Jake tried to stand, but his legs gave out. Foster caught him before he hit the ground. "Easy, son. You are done. You held long enough. The ambassador. We will get him out. We will get all of you out." Foster looked around again at the carnage. "How many Crone did you kill?" "Lost count," Jake said. Foster whistled low. 15 when we started." The colonel's expression went even harder. "Names. I want the names of everyone who died here." Amy Rogers recited them from memory. 7 names of people who had stood and fought and died doing their jobs. Foster recorded each one on his personal log. Those names would be entered into the records. Those names would be remembered. Queen Sareth approached slowly, moving through the human soldiers who now filled her throne room. They were so different from the Crone. The Crone had come to conquer. These humans came to rescue, but they looked just as dangerous, just as capable of violence. "Your fleet," she said to Foster. "They destroyed the Crone ships in minutes." "Yes, Your Majesty. And now you are destroying their ground forces." "Yes, Your Majesty." "Will you stop when the Crone are dead?" Foster looked at her. "We will stop when every Crone in this system is dead or has surrendered. And then, we are going to their homeworld." "Their homeworld?" "But that is 3 systems away." "You cannot." "Your Majesty," Foster said quietly. "They killed our ambassador. They attacked our people. We do not forgive that. We do not forget it. We will follow them back to whatever hole they came from, and we will make sure they never do this again." She stared at him, trying to understand. "This is about revenge. This is about making sure no one ever thinks they can attack humans without consequences." The battle for the planet lasted another 6 hours. The Crone fought hard, but they were used to opponents who would surrender when the odds became unfavorable. Humans did not surrender. They just kept coming, wave after wave, using tactics that seemed insane but somehow worked. By the time the sun rose on the 2nd day, every Crone soldier on the planet was dead or in custody. The humans had lost 300 Marines in the ground assault. It was considered an acceptable casualty rate. Admiral Carter established a command post in orbit and began planning the next phase. The Crone Dominion needed to learn a lesson. Earth was going to teach it. 3 months later, Jake Morrison found himself standing in front of the Galactic Council. He had been recovering from his injuries, learning to use his left arm again, going through physical therapy that hurt worse than the battle had. Now, they wanted him to testify about what had happened. The council chamber was enormous, designed to hold representatives from hundreds of species. Jake felt very small standing in the center of it, looking up at the tiered seating where aliens sat in judgment. "You are Jake Morrison," the lead counselor said. She was Draxian, tall and elegant, with skin that looked like polished wood. "You were present at the Vaishon Palace during the attack. Yes, counselor. Please describe what happened, Jake told them. He kept it simple, factual, unemotional. He described the attack, the defense, the 34 hours of continuous combat. He described watching his people die one by one, holding a position that should have been overrun in minutes. The council listened in silence. And when your fleet arrived, the counselor asked, why did they not attempt to negotiate with the crone? Because the crone had killed our ambassador. One person. They killed one person. And in response, your species launched a military campaign that has destroyed 17 crone worlds. Jake looked at her. Yes, that seems excessive. That seems necessary. Another counselor, this one Corvan with scales that shimmered in the light, leaned forward. You do not understand how civilization works, human. You do not start wars over single deaths. You negotiate. You find diplomatic solutions. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. He pushed it down, kept his voice level. You left us there. All of you. Your people, your ambassadors. They ran when the attack started. You saved yourselves and left the Veshon to die. We had to protect our own personnel. So did we. Jake's voice echoed through the chamber. The difference is, we stayed. We fought. And when our people called for help, every human who could carry a weapon came running. That is civilization, counselor. That is what it means to be part of a community. The chamber fell silent. Queen Sareth stood. She was here as a witness too, though she had not been called to speak yet. May I say something? May I say something? The lead counselor nodded, looking surprised. I watched these humans fight, the queen said. I saw what they became when their ambassador was killed. And I will tell you all something, I am glad they were on our side. Because if they had not been, my entire species would be dead right now. She turned to look at the council, at all the species who had run when danger came. You call their response excessive. You call it uncivilized. But where were you? Where were any of you? The humans stayed. The humans fought. And yes, the humans took revenge. But they did it to protect not just themselves, but us. All of us. In the back of the chamber, a crone prisoner was brought forward. Warlord Thex, one of the few high-ranking officers who had survived the human counterattack. He had requested to testify, though no one understood why. I wish to tell the council what I saw, Thex said. His voice was harsh, damaged from injuries. I commanded ground forces on the Vishan planet. We outnumbered the human defenders 200 to 1. We had superior weapons, superior armor, superior position. And yet you lost, the counselor said. We did not lose. We were destroyed. There is a difference. Thex looked at Jake with something that might have been respect or might have been fear. I shot one of your soldiers myself. I hit her 17 times. She kept fighting for another 4 minutes. 4 minutes. After receiving wounds that should have killed her instantly, he turned back to the council. You do not understand what humans are. I thought I did. I thought they were like the other species, soft, comfortable, easy to break. I was wrong. Humans are not civilized despite their capacity for violence. They are civilized because of it. They know what they are capable of, and they choose to control it. But when you take away that choice, when you force them to fight, you discover something terrible. What is that? The counselor asked quietly. You discover that they are very, very good at it. The testimony lasted 3 more hours. By the end, the council had made its decision. They could not stop humanity's military campaign against the Crone Dominion. They could barely even criticize it, not when the evidence showed that humans had only responded to an unprovoked attack. But something had changed in the galaxy. Other species looked at humanity differently now. They saw the warships that had appeared from nowhere. They heard the stories of Marines who fought with impossible courage. They learned about the broken arrow code and what it meant. Humanity had revealed itself. The peaceful mask was gone. And underneath it, the galaxy saw something ancient and dangerous, something that had been sleeping for decades. The myths began almost immediately. Stories spread through trade routes and communication networks, stories about humans who could not be killed, who fought like demons, who would travel across the galaxy to avenge a single fallen comrade. Some of the stories were true. Many were exaggerated, but all of them carried the same message. Do not anger the humans. Do not hurt them. Do not give them a reason to show you what they really are. Jake Morrison returned to Earth a hero. He was offered medals, promotions, speaking tours. He declined all of it. He just wanted to go home, to a small apartment in the mountains, where he could try to forget what he had become in that throne room. But he could not forget. None of them could. They had opened a door that could not be closed. The galaxy had asked, who protected humanity? And humanity had answered with fire and blood. The myth had begun. And it would echo through the stars for generations to come. 5 years passed. The galaxy learned to live with the knowledge of what humans truly were. Trade continued. Diplomatic relations remained stable. But there was a new caution now, a careful respect that had not existed before. When human representatives entered a room, others moved aside. When human ships entered a system, traffic control gave them priority passage. Fear had become respect. Respect had become something closer to reverence. Jake Morrison spent those 5 years trying to be normal. He taught at the military academy, training the next generation of soldiers. He gave lectures on defensive tactics and crisis management. He tried not to think about the throne room, about the bodies, about the part of himself he had discovered when everything was falling apart. It did not work. The memories stayed with him, sharp and clear. In quiet moments, he could still smell the burned flesh, could still feel his broken ribs grinding together, could still see the look in Queen Sareth's eyes when she realized what humans became when they stopped pretending to be civilized. President Julia Henderson stood in the Oval Office, looking at reports that made her stomach turn. The Vex had appeared 6 months ago, emerging from dark space beyond the galactic rim. They were like nothing anyone had ever seen. Machines that thought, or maybe organisms that had become mechanical. No one could agree on what they were. Everyone agreed. They were destroying everything in their path. 12 civilizations had fallen already. Entire worlds stripped of life. Their populations processed into raw materials. Their cities torn apart and rebuilt into massive geometric structures that served purposes no one understood. The Galactic Council had met 17 times to discuss the threat. They had formed committees, drafted response plans, allocated resources for refugee management. They had done everything except actually fight. They are afraid, Henderson's chief of staff said, reading the latest council transcripts. They are hoping the Vex will just stop on their own. Will they? No. The Vex do not negotiate. They do not stop. They just consume and move on. Henderson sat down heavily. Have we been contacted? The council wants to meet with you. They want to ask for help, but they are too afraid to actually ask. Yes, ma'am. Henderson had expected this. 5 years ago, humanity had shown the galaxy what they were capable of. Now, the galaxy needed that capacity, but was terrified to unleash it. They wanted protection but feared the protectors. Set up the meeting, she said. Let us hear what they have to say. The meeting took place on a neutral station in deep space. The council chamber was smaller than the main one on the Galactic Council homeworld. More intimate. Representatives from 50 species sat in a circle, and in the center stood President Henderson, alone. Queen Sareth was there, older now, wiser. She had become one of the most influential voices in the council. When she spoke, others listened. Thank you for coming, Madam President, the Draxian counselor said. She was the same one who had questioned Jake 5 years ago. We have a situation. I am aware of the Vex, Henderson said. Then you know they are unstoppable. Conventional military forces cannot slow them down. Every species that has tried has been destroyed. So you want humans to do it. Silence. The counselors looked at each other, uncomfortable with the direct statement. We want to ask for help, the Corvin counselor said carefully. We want to discuss what a coordinated defense might look like. You want to ask if we will fight for you, Henderson corrected. But you are afraid that if we do, we will become worse than the Vex. You are afraid that once we start fighting, we will not stop. More silence. Henderson looked around the circle, meeting each counselor's eyes. 5 years ago, my people responded to an attack on our ambassador. We did not ask permission. We did not wait for council approval. We simply acted. And yes, we were brutal. Yes, we were excessive by your standards. But we did it to send a message. Leave humans alone. And now you think we should send you to fight the Vex? The Draxian counselor asked. No, Henderson said quietly. I think you should ask yourselves a question. 5 years ago, Queen Sareth asked one of my people who protects us. Today I am asking you, who protects you? Queen Sareth stood. I will tell you who protects us. We all do. Or we should. But we have become comfortable. We have built civilizations on peace, and trade, and diplomacy. We have forgotten how to fight for ourselves. She looked at Henderson. I watched your people fight in my throne room. I saw what they became. It terrified me then. It still terrifies me now. But I also know that if they had not been there, my entire species would be gone. The Corvin counselor shook his head. We cannot simply unleash the humans on every problem we face. They are too dangerous. Then what do you suggest? Queen Sareth asked. Should we wait until the Vex reach our homeworlds? Should we form another committee? An old voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Elder Vresh, one of the oldest beings in the galaxy, moved slowly into the light. He was Tarlian, a species that had existed for 50,000 years. Most counselors had never heard him speak before. I have seen this before, Vresh said, his voice like wind through dry leaves. 60,000 years ago, there was another species like the humans, warriors who could not be stopped. We called them the Wraith. They protected the young civilizations of that era. What happened to them? Henderson asked. They forgot their compassion. They became the thing they fought against. They conquered instead of protected. Eventually, the galaxy united to stop them. It took 10,000 years. He looked at Henderson with eyes that had seen empires rise and fall. Humans are like the Wraith, in many ways. But I have studied your species for decades. I have read your histories, your philosophies, your stories. What is that? The ability to choose. The Wraith were warriors without restraint. You are warriors who choose restraint. That is the difference between a monster and a protector. The council debated for 3 more hours. In the end, they did not vote. They simply asked the question they had been too afraid to ask. Will you help us? Welsome, will you help us? Henderson did not answer immediately. She thought about Jake Morrison, about all the soldiers who had learned what they were capable of and now had to live with that knowledge. She thought about the cost of war, not in resources or territory, but in the souls of the people who fought it. We will help, she said finally. But on one condition. This is not a human war. This is everyone's war. We will fight, but you fight with us. Every species that can contribute, does contribute. We are not your sword to wield. We are your partners. End quote. The counselors agreed. They had no choice. Jake Morrison was teaching a class on tactical defensive positions when the message came through. Report to the recruitment office. Full mobilization order. The Vex War had begun. He looked at his students, young men and women who had joined the military during peacetime, who thought of combat as an abstract concept studied in classrooms. Class dismissed, he said. Go home. Tell your families you love them. Report back here in 6 hours with full gear. One student raised her hand. She was young, maybe 20, with bright eyes and a confident smile. Her name was Lucy Palmer. "Sir, is this it? Are we going to war?" Jake looked at her and saw himself 5 years ago, before the throne room, before he learned what he was capable of. "Yes," he said simply. "Will we win? I do not know." The human mobilization was massive. Earth had been building up its military for 5 years, quietly, without announcement. Now, that military deployed into the galactic theater. 300 ships, 50,000 Marines, support staff in the hundreds of thousands. But this time, they were not alone. The Veshans sent their fleet, newly rebuilt with human assistance. The Draxians contributed their industrial capacity. The Corvans provided intelligence networks. Dozens of species, some who had never fielded a military force before, sent what they could. The first battle against the Vex took place in the Helion system. The Vex had already consumed 2 planets and were beginning work on the third. The combined galactic fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel and engaged immediately. The battle was brutal. The Vex did not use conventional tactics. They did not try to outmaneuver or outthink their opponents. They simply overwhelmed with numbers and firepower. Their ships were massive geometric shapes that seemed to defy physics, moving in ways that should have been impossible. Jake's regiment hit the surface of the third planet, trying to evacuate civilians before the Vex processing machines could reach them. He ran through burning cities, calling for survivors, organizing extraction points. Around him, Marines from a dozen different species worked together, learning on the fly how to coordinate their different strengths. Lucy Palmer fought beside him, her weapon firing in controlled bursts. She had lost her confidence somewhere between the drop and the landing. "Stay close," Jake told her. "Watch your sectors. Call out targets. There are so many of them," she said, her voice shaking. "There always are. We fight anyway." They held the evacuation point for 6 hours. This time, Jake had ammunition. This time, he had reinforcements. This time, the whole galaxy was fighting together, instead of running away. The Vex pushed hard, but the combined force pushed back harder. Slowly, painfully, they cleared the city. Thousands of civilians made it to the evacuation ships. Not everyone survived, but more lived than would have without the intervention. The battle for Helion lasted 3 weeks. The Vex were pushed back, their processing facilities destroyed, their fleet damaged. It was a victory, but an expensive one. The combined forces lost 60 ships and 5,000 soldiers. The war continued. More battles, more systems, more desperate fights to slow the Vex advance. Months turned into a year. The year turned into 2. Jake became a colonel, then a general. He led combined forces, learning to work with alien soldiers who had different ways of fighting, different concepts of courage, different limits to what they could endure. He learned that Veshan soldiers were better at electronic warfare, that Draxian Marines excelled at defensive positions, that Corvan pilots could fly maneuvers human pilots could not match. He learned that courage was not unique to humans. Fear was universal. And so was the choice to fight despite that fear. Lucy Palmer became a lieutenant. She lost her fear and found something harder, the ability to keep fighting when everything seemed hopeless. She became a good soldier, not as brutal as Jake, not as willing to become a monster when necessary, but good enough. The turning point came in the 3rd year. The combined forces had been slowly learning the Vex patterns, understanding their limitations. A massive assault was planned on a Vex hive world, a place where they built new ships and processed conquered populations. Jake led the ground assault. Queen Sareth coordinated the space battle. Admiral Carter commanded the human fleet elements, working alongside commanders from 40 other species. The battle lasted 4 days. It was the largest military engagement the galaxy had seen in recorded history. Ships numbered in the thousands. Soldiers numbered in the hundreds of thousands. On the third day, the Veshon flagship was badly damaged. Its engines were failing. Its weapons were offline. The Vex swarmed toward it. Seeing an easy target, the human destroyer ESS Defiant moved to intercept. Its captain, a woman named Sandra Price, daughter of the captain who had defended the Veshon system 5 years ago, put her ship between the Vex and the Veshon flagship. All Veshon crew. "This is Captain Price," she broadcast. "Prepare for emergency transfer. We are getting you out. But your ship," the Veshon commander protested, "will hold long enough." "That is what we do." The Defiant held for 20 minutes, taking damage that should have destroyed it in seconds. 20 minutes was enough. The Veshon crew transferred. Then Price ordered her remaining crew to evacuate while she stayed at the helm, guiding the dying ship into the largest Vex cluster. The explosion destroyed 17 Vex ships. When the battle was over, when the hive world was burning, and the Vex were finally retreating, Queen Sareth found Jake on the planet's surface. He was sitting on a piece of rubble, exhausted, covered in dirt and blood that was not entirely his own. "Captain Price," the Queen said quietly. "She saved my people." "She did what humans do," Jake said. "She protected others at cost to herself. 5 years ago, I asked you who protects humans. Do you remember what you said? I said we protect each other. You were wrong." The Queen sat down beside him. "Humans protect everyone. Even species who were too afraid to fight beside you at first. Even people who judged you for being too violent. You protect us anyway." Jake looked at her. "Because that is who we choose to be. I understand now, the answer to my question." Where soldiers from 50 species were helping each other, treating wounded, sharing supplies. Everyone does. We all protect each other. That is what you taught us. The war lasted 2 more years. The Vex were not destroyed. They retreated back into dark space, damaged enough that they would not return for generations. The galaxy had held, but the cost had been enormous. A monument was erected on the Veshon homeworld, near the palace where Jake had made his stand 5 years earlier. It showed a human soldier standing guard, but around the base were figures representing all the species that had fought. The inscription was simple, written in every galactic language. They asked who protects the protectors. The answer: we all do. Together. Jake Morrison retired after the war. He went back to his apartment in the mountains and tried again to be normal. This time, it was easier. The memories were still there. But they were joined by other memories of working alongside aliens who had become friends, of victories achieved through cooperation, of a galaxy that had learned to protect itself. Lucy Palmer visited him sometimes. She was a captain now, teaching at the academy, passing on what she had learned. "Do you think it will last?" she asked one day, looking out at the mountains. "The cooperation. The unity. For a while," Jake said. "Maybe a long while. Until people forget what the cost was. And then we remind them. Gently if we can, forcefully if we must." She smiled. "You sound like a protector." "I am a protector. We all are. That is the myth, Lucy. Not that humans are unstoppable warriors. That is just part of it. The real myth is that when one of us falls, the others will come running. And now the galaxy believes that myth too. Not just about humans, but about all of us." Years later, long after Jake had passed away, people still told the story. They told it to young soldiers, to teach them about duty. They told it to diplomats, to teach them about cooperation. They told it to children to teach them about courage. The story of when the Queen asked who protects you, and the human became myth. But the myth was not about violence or strength. It was about a choice. The choice to stand when others run. The choice to protect when it would be easier to flee. The choice to believe that everyone deserves protection, even when they cannot protect themselves. That was the myth that echoed through the galaxy. And it was true.